And I am now supposed to be introducing, or rather reintroducing, since the people here are mostly the ones that have been attending the workshop, reintroducing the Metabody project. Since meta, I've been reading the program, I found an interesting definition here. Meta as in between, as movement across, and other things that were mentioned before. I suggest that you take precisely my presentation as an interval. Please take it as a break. Feel free to go out in between. So I will now continue straight away with this introduction, in-betweenness. I also found an interesting definition of a metabody as an emergent field of kinetic and affective relations. How far are we now having here an emergent field of affective and kinetic relations? What kind of metabody are we constituting in this room now? As I am standing here, I am reproducing an obvious performance of alignments that reproduce a certain assumption that we all share a common language, which I think is not true. We don't share a common language. So I would like to start challenging the very assumption that we share a common language. As I stand here, up here, try to look for a minute on the particular spatial alignments and try to think of them as perceptual alignments. You're sitting there passively, apparently passively, maybe not. I am standing up here, apparently actively, but I'm framed with a screen behind me. I have this table that I would like to push, but I can't because it's cabled. So it has to stand there in the middle with the computers on top of it. And well, we have tried to disorganize with Eva the chairs a little bit, but still it looks a little bit like a conference room. So try to think how much that perceptual alignment that makes you look from your own centralized perspective towards a central framing, to this screen, to this scenario, how much that is a crucial part, crucial constitutive element of this fiction of a common language. So, how much do these perceptual alignments that we are now reproducing through your sitting there and through my standing up here, how much do these foreclose the potentials for us to understand the irreducible differences that we are perhaps not quite sharing, but that we could potentially share? So then this is part of what the project is going to deal. I'm just giving you a case study, as someone was asking yesterday us to do. So starting from our own situation here now, I'm absolutely certain that each of you is interpreting my words in radically different manners. But I guess that as long as we keep this perceptual fiction of alignment that makes us think that we have a common language, that words mean the same thing for everyone, because they are fixed in a screen, in a perceptual grid, as long as we keep that, I'm not sure that we can generate potentials of emergence in this field, here and now. So what about if I step out of that, okay? Let's try to do something different for a while, because one of the problems, of course, is that you take this, we have been taking this space for granted. We think it as a Cartesian res extensa. You know, we think it's a measurable space in which everything is already given. Yes, so exactly. Please, feel free to move. And I would suggest something. I would ask you to move very slowly, because it doesn't have to be. But if you move very slowly, you will notice how radically the space sensation and perception changes, which means we start to generate literally a new space-time. So perceiving space-time as given, as aligned within a grid of fictions of universality, has to do with certain speeds and trajectories. We tend to move very quickly in this highly dense, saturated informational field that we live in. So how about moving a little bit slower for a minute? When I say slow, I am very radical. Please think about like 1 centimeter per second. What happens to the space if we move at about 1 centimeter per second? Try to realize how far perception and your own proprioception, your own self-perception changes. And just let that awareness emerge in a very subtle way. Don't try to force it. Don't try, even though people are aligned with their smartphones, using their Facebook and communicating with their friends as I speak, just in front of me. So that's part of the alignment, of course, but what I'm trying to shift with this little exercise is from a paradigm of performance in which we are reproducing a certain grid, a certain given perceptual grid that reproduces this fiction of universality, so that we are all perceptually aligned with a Cartesian machine of lines, planes, and points of capture, to what I call a metaformative grid. So from a performative to a metaformative, what does this mean? To stop being external spectators that assume a separation from an external world. Yes, we're moving very slowly. Can you do that? You don't have to. To try to break from that particular kind of alignment that makes us feel that we are external to an objective reality and that we are a kind of disembodied mind that is just a spectator, to having and that is just looking onto a given world, a given reality, to a different kind of field in which we are inseparable from the space-time that we are creating with our movements, in which perhaps there starts to be a potential for us to generate differential fields, which means maybe we are no longer now assuming that there are such things as disembodied patterns of information that we are all seamlessly sharing and reproducing, but that we are generating transductively, as Federica was saying before, transductively generating something that was not there before and that we cannot anticipate. How do we generate ecologies for this kind of non-preempted emergence? This will be one of the questions that will drive the Metabody project for 5 years, which means we have to undo the very frameworks in which the project is starting and which we kind of share. And this can be done in infinite potential ways. So hopefully with the collaboration, the transductive field of collaborations that we generate amongst the partners, we can start to open up this field of potential in unforeseeable ways. This, of course, implies addressing many issues, many problematic issues, because each of us comes from specific super alignments, from specific assumptions about how the world is, from specific ways of assuming that divide of being outside the world as an abstract entity. So the ways of bridging or entering a different kind of field of immanence, a relational transductive field, will be very different for each of us. So it's a challenge. That's what we were calling these days the meta-methodological framework, because we can't fix a method. We have to permanently be transductively generating new conditions for the emergence of this ecology. And this will depend radically on the bodies involved and the movements involved in the process. Yes. So, we just keep exploring this for a few minutes, and but of course it's crucial. It's crucial to improvise. Don't control. Don't realign yourselves. You're being spectators. I feel it. But never mind. Let's just try to feel for one more minute. So this sensation of an emergent space-time. I suggest you try this when you're walking in the streets, disaligning yourselves from the highly up-speeded trajectories and super-aligned trajectories of the industrial machine, recodified with the informational machine, recodified with other very complex machines that are actually choreographing our affects, our perceptions. So there are infinite potential ways of disalignment from those choreographies. The purpose is not disaligning for the sake of disaligning, it's just seeing what problems are there inherent to assuming certain given trajectories that are part of sometimes highly problematic regimes of control and power. And the question for me is not how to oppose to those alignments a different alignment, but how to open up movement from the molecular sphere to the planetary, to potentials that are not preempted. So I will now make a transition to the other world. You can keep that. I will now make a transition to the other world, slowly, so that I can introduce our following guest. And you can slowly make the transition yourselves, if you wish.